think that what we'll do, we'll start from this end. We're going to ask each of you to stand like the other candidates have done when you give your introductory remarks. You have 2 to 3 minutes to introduce yourself and tell everybody what you stand for, I guess.
Okay. My name is Jim Clark. I've been pretty much a lifelong resident. Pardon me?
Louder, please.
Sorry, my name is Jim Clark. I've been a lifelong resident of the county. I started out in Blandford, which is sort of the Berkshires, but we rolled downhill. I ended up starting construction businesses, went to school at UMass, became a structural engineer, went to Cornell and got a degree in engineering management, and then went to Duke University and got a degree in infrastructure research. I feel that having been in the area for so long, that it'd be nice to return the area, or at least center the area to what it is. I mean, we're very service-oriented now. There's an abundance of restaurants and gift shops and real estate offices. There used to be hardware stores, lumber yards. I mean, maybe that's just my bent towards the construction business. I would like to see us get our budgets back in order. We have a lot of real estate that could be developed, and I thought I would never ever say this, but with the internet being what it is these days, I mean, Amazon just dumped 2,000 jobs in Boston. I mean, there's no reason with the kind of space that we have, something like that could not happen here. I have 3 children that went through the old school system, Houstonic School, Williams, and everything, and they all went to higher education. They're all doctors of different persuasions, and they all live in Boston because they just can't make the same rate that they would like to make here. We have to bring our talent back and make it attractive for somebody that gets out of Monument Mountain and goes to UMass or goes to Lord knows where, want to come home and invest their time and energies in the county. Another thing is that I think our budgets are driven by the school budget. I'm totally for education. I'm not saying anything negative against that. But we have to somehow balance the percentage of money that goes from our tax dollars into the educational budget. It almost seems that the school board, and I'm not being derogatory, but they come out with a budget, and then that tags into the town budget, and there we are. So I think that's got to somehow change. We have challenges. We have Monument Mountain, which has come up 3 times now, and the population is diminishing. I don't think we need all these proposals like, knock it down, let's do a new school for $40, $50 million. I've built in my time 12 different school districts all through the Northeast, which were considerably more money. But there's a thing called value engineering, where we can look at it, we can save what we can save, and we can replace what we have to replace. We did the Muddy Brook School thing, which is what it is. I think we have a little more space there. But I said we have an aging population, and we should get our priorities together as far as how our taxes are spent towards school funding. We have the Houstonic School, which I gave the town a proposal 3 or 4 years ago to request the Selectboard on what it would take to do something with that building. I live just up the road from that building, and my children went to that building, and I love it. Nothing's been done. Absolutely nothing. A proposal went out that was inadequate, I think, and it's standing there. We have cases like the old fire station, which is really ironic, because the town at bargain-based prices sold that fire station to a developer from New York, and it's full of asbestos. It's still standing there without any work being done on it. But in their great wisdom, the town of Great Barrington decided to rent space in that building. And who did they put in there? The health department and the building inspector, right on top of a mess. I mean, it's with my experience in infrastructure, and I've done projects up to $500 million here, there, and around the world. I just finished up my commitment to MGM Casinos in Springfield, which was especially enlightening. And now I'm doing Tokyo Municipal Airport repair facilities. I know how to get these things done. I know infrastructure, I know construction, and I know the interface with the public and how to do it. As I said, I've done Briarcliff Schools, Amherst, Springfield, Boston. I mean, it's a process. It's a bunch of boards, and everybody has an opinion. And you know what? None of them are wrong. It's just embrace the concept and get it done on time and within budget. And I don't see that happening in Great Barrington. So that's why I'm running.
I'm Bill Cook. I'm running for re-election. I've been on the board for 3 years. My wife was on the board before me, and as she was retiring from the board, I was retiring from work, so I thought it was a good move on my part to come in and fill in. Turns out it's more interesting work than I anticipated, so I'm hoping to run again. I am running again. I've been in town since 1989. My children went to school here, graduated from Monument, and I find that working on the select board is okay. You have a lot of special permits to deal with, but it also gets you involved in other boards. I'm now on the Berkshire Regional Transit Board, hoping to keep our buses running in Great Barrington. And I've started the Affordable Housing Trust, which is now launching its down payment assistance program, and we will soon have a rehabilitation program to help people who have been living in their houses for a long time, who don't have the money to fix up the house, to put a new roof on, or fix the furnace, whatever. I'm also on the Lake Mansfield Improvement Task Force. We've been working on fixing the lake and preserving it. When my kids were little, I used to take them to the lake every day in the summer. And I would hate to see that lake destroyed by the road falling into it. I think that's really covers it. You get involved in more things. When you're on the select board, you get involved in a number of different things. I can give out just so many common victular licenses and alcoholic beverage licenses, and pretty soon, I guess, marijuana licenses, and a number of special permits, but you get to do a lot more in town. I think I've contributed quite a bit in the short time I've been on the board. I'd like to continue. I feel I'm just getting the hang of it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Holly Hamer. I've lived here for 45 years. I started a small business about 30 years ago. Well, it was actually about 40 years ago. Mill River Studio, and it was a picture framing and art gallery, and it was on Railroad Street for about 11 of those years. I became a library friend of the library about 11 years ago when they were resurrecting the Friends of the Library group that had been dormant at Mason Library. This was right after the renovation, and they picked 3 people who were sort of the loudest complainers about some issues and put us on the Friends, and I've been working on that since that time. My focus there and in other things has been on fairness. I think that's one of my biggest issues, and in that regard, I see Housatonic as a place that maybe hasn't gotten as much attention or as much money as Great Barrington has, and I'd like to redress that. As a friend of the library, we were able to get Sunday hours at Ramsdale Library, which has proven to be the most heavily attended day of the week, success. In the last couple of years, I've started attending a lot of meetings, especially this last year. I've been to almost every select board, every planning board meeting, and every library trustee meeting. And just for kicks, I've attended a number of other meetings and projects, the Pollinator Highway Project and the Cultural District Project. And I actually find myself, I call myself a municipal geek now, because I actually enjoy meetings. I really enjoy the wonderful process of town meeting and of special permitting that really encourages individuals to speak and have their questions answered. I think that we could do a lot more for civic literacy in this town, make it even easier and more accessible for people, so that we really are including the whole community in decisions. And I hope those decisions are generally made by consensus wherever possible. I think that this job requires a lot of time, which I'm willing to give, and it also requires a lot of stamina, which I hope I have. Thank you.
My name is Kate Burke. I am from South County and graduated from Monument in 2003. I am currently the manager of the Great Barrington Farmers Market, which starts this Saturday. My husband Joe and I own our home by the airport, and I have two small children, Aoife, who is 4, and Wiley, who is almost 10 months. I have to say, I can't think of a harder thing to do than stand in front of a room full of people, but the demographic I represent is vital to the future of the area, and I can help. I have made the decision to run for Select Board, as I find it incredibly important that young parents with young children are represented. I want to be sure that we can afford our home, raise our children here in a safe community with a quality education while preparing for the future so that our children have the option of returning. I have the unique perspective of being both a new and lifelong resident, as I left and returned. I know the struggle of running a small business and the importance of the second homeowners and tourists alike, as I managed Rubner's for 5 years. I also know the difficulty of living here for people on fixed incomes, as I have both worked and volunteered at CHP. My experiences give me the ability to see all sides of the argument, which is an asset to this town. I have spent many years trying to perfect myself as a dancer, and I know what hard work means. Even before I entered the race, I began meeting with current selectmen, most department heads, and many individuals representing different constituencies, to really gain as much knowledge and perspective as I can. I have attended select meetings, as well as reviewed the town charter, master plan, and other important town documents. I understand the challenges of this job, and I still want to do it. I am an active member of this community. I am involved in many organizations and businesses through my husband, my children, and myself. It will be easy for me to learn and understand the needs of community members, especially those of young families. I will remain accessible and will add additional ways to be easily reached. I come to this without having all the answers. What I do have is a willingness and ability to listen, learn, and make an informed decision for the future. I love this community, its people, and its history. I want to be at the table as we go forward towards the future. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chris Tucci. I would like to say that, Mr. Clark, I agree with you in your interest in diversifying from pure service industries and attracting 21st century industry. Mr. Cook, your work on the Affordable Housing Trust and the down payment assistance is commendable, and I look forward to seeing that grow. Ms. Hamer, your extraordinary work in opening Ramsdale on Sundays is something that my family and I have taken advantage of, and we are extremely grateful for that. And Ms. Burke, I too want my children to return to Great Barrington, and your commitment to your candidacy and to the families of Great Barrington is amazing. So, I grew up in a small town in Ohio next to a horse track, and I love small towns. And when we had the option to select anywhere we could live in the United States, Great Barrington rose to the top of that list. We lived in Los Angeles, and our careers took us across the country, where I spent 8 years as a tenured professor at Heidelberg University. And when my wife and I began a summer camp from scratch in Connecticut, we had the options to come up on our very few days off, and we saw Great Barrington. And what we saw was a place where we wanted our family to live. I saw a vibrant downtown. I saw excellent schools. I saw beautiful landscapes and amazing world-class cultural offerings. Our aim when we moved here was to come as servants. So in my role as Deputy Director at Railroad Street Youth Project, I work and focus on intergenerational communication and youth empowerment. My wife works as Director of Education and Community Programming at Berkshire South Community Center. We are committed to this community. The beauty is also met with great need. I serve as a leader on the Southern Berkshire Community Health Coalition, where I work with representatives from the schools and other service organizations to counter the opioid crisis and the other risk factors that impact our youth and families. As an educator, a coach, and a parent in our local school systems, I see the extraordinary and committed work that our staff and faculty put in every day. But I also see the failing infrastructure, outdated books, and a need for a community-wide effort to restructure our tax commitment relative to our neighbors in Stockbridge and West Stockbridge. As a community member, I also see the stretch to meet the rising taxes. Those who feel isolated and forgotten, the same locals who grew up and hauled framing trusses from up at our rail station, down the street to Bridge Street to build the youth center where I work today, those sacrifices are sometimes forgotten and ignored when we look at our tax and the way we structure that with our school system. My family and I selected Great Barrington, and I hope I have the honor to serve you on the Select Board.
Before we begin the questioning, I do want to announce that one of the candidates for selectman, Gavin Pollock, was unable to be here tonight, but I didn't want to leave him out of the announcements for the board. I do have one question I want to start off with. Many years ago, I forget how many now, the town developed a town charter, and it has been reviewed at least once, maybe a second time, I can't recall now. And what I'm wondering is, are you comfortable with the system that the town charter has set up for the town of Great Barrington and how the administration in the town works? Just a general question, just to get your feelings on what we've been doing. Anyway.
I think it's working reasonably well. Strong town manager.
Stand up.
All right. I think it's working reasonably well. I don't think I would want to change it at this point. We may, if we grow a little bigger, have to think about revisiting the charter. But for now, I think it's working all right.
Jim?
I'm not really sure. There is a town manager in place, and we have a government that's supposed to be run by that town manager. I think currently, and this will probably get me in trouble, but I think what we need is an administrative assistant. Current town manager can fulfill the role of administrative assistant for a lot less money, and I'm not exactly sure, being a town planner myself, why we have one, because I see no positive coming out of that.
I did serve with Paul, who was chair, and with Eileen on the Charter Review Committee member, pardon me, no? And Michael on the Charter Review group. It was like pulling teeth. It was very laborious, and it was very challenging. I think, just as a plug for myself, I think I voted on one change, and I lost 1 to 12. But it was a setback, but I came back. And when we finished, I thought it was an excellent product. In the charter is the responsibilities and powers of the Select Board, which I reread today. It's extremely interesting. I think there's a little bit of confusion about the difference between the town code and the town charter, and I'm still not cognizant enough to really explain that. But it's two documents that many people, even people who are very active in the town government, probably are not aware of and don't see as much as they see the zoning bylaws, which are often called into use by individuals particularly. But I'm satisfied with it.
Okay.
And to Sean, who was here earlier but left, I think the Select Board has done a really great job setting the pace for the town, but to the town charter, I think that the Select Board can do an even better job looking towards the future and really trying to set long-term goals as opposed to looking year to year.
Chris?
Yeah, I think in particular for those who are interested, I heard a lot of applause when Mr. Clark brought up the cessation of a town manager. I think it's really important. Eileen has done extraordinary work as a member of our press to open up the review of our town manager, and I think it's important for us as citizens to review the Select Board's review of their work in order for us as informed citizens to make a better decision as to whether or not that is working for us or not working for us. I think, like you mentioned, Ms. Burke, that the Select Board is doing an extraordinary job identifying problems and working with them as they come. And I too would like to see some more forward thinking, the ability to identify problems before they arrive and start to work on those.
I want to ask about strategic planning. So it sort of leads into some of the things that you were talking about. So often in these jobs, not only on the Select Board, but all the other boards, you have to deal with the things that are right in front of you to solve the problem, to fix the problem, to do this year's budget. But where does leadership come? Where does the role of the Select Board come in establishing our shared mission, our shared values, and making sure that that's articulated and we're headed all in the same direction? We want to avoid the situation where people have their own idea of where we should go, or their own idea of what Great Barrington is. And I think that we can do that as a collective. And I'd like to see some more thought given into not just the future capital needs, but where the character of the town, and come in with some leadership. If you could respond to that, that would be helpful.
I think it's probably oversimplification, but I think we have to be more proactive. It's not when, in my life, I try to avoid it, but you have a problem right in front of you, and then you got to deal with it. I think the town has the resources, has the intellect, and some people, in the government, to see what's coming down the tracks, and to deal with that, rather than, going to a select board meeting or town meetings goes through warrants, for a select board meeting, and everybody raises their hand, I want this, I want this, I want this, and it throws it into the ozone. I think the town government, they have executive sessions, I understand. They should see this. And if it's on the agenda, for a week or 2 weeks ahead of time, then they should do their research and be there now to deal with it. Not wait for it to just show up on, no offense, on CTSB or whatever. Really have to be proactive.
I'd like to point in particular to the work of Ed Abrams. When I think of a select person who is available to their constituency, who listens to the needs of their constituents and takes those into account, my experience as a constituent of Great Barrington is most often through the work of Ed Abrams. He does the work of coming to the Youth Operational Board and hearing directly from young people He's at the library, and I think moving forward, I'd like to see that more of all of those who serve on the select board. In my former town, our mayor was active on Twitter and Facebook and responded to constituents in real time. And while many of us don't think it's the greatest form of communication on earth, it is direct and it is immediate. And I think that candidates on the select board and those serving on the select board should be available to their constituents to answer those questions and available online.
I think you made excellent points, Chris. I think that it's hard to lead when you come to a meeting and you have to do your homework at the meeting. It seems to me that leadership comes from being fully informed. And you know, we get accused of being provincial out at the western end of the state. And sometimes I've found in meetings that people do try to reinvent the wheel, that they're not using all the resources of all of these different towns and cities who have addressed very similar problems to what we have been facing. In the charter, the roles of the select board is to set goals, develop long-range plans, and adopt policy for the town. One of the other problems I see is that with a 3-year term, it's hard to have continuity. So if you're planning a 10-year plan, capital improvement plan in particular, you may not have consistency because the board may be changing. That isn't, you know, I see that with our master plan, which I think is a masterful document, but sometimes it's used in the same issue for and against because of all of the diverse needs and the idealism that we have expressed about our town and what we want it to be, coming straight up against financial hardship. I think that what you're saying is definitely a direction we should take, or the select board should take, but I think it's challenging, and that's why it maybe hasn't done as much of that. We haven't done as much of that as we could have.
I think I've been relatively proactive. When I initially ran, I identified affordable housing as one of our real needs in this area. And so I went to work and I started the Affordable Housing Trust and wrote the bylaw and got that passed, and now it's a functioning organization. If I'm re-elected, I'd like to tackle economic development. I think we need an economic development committee of some kind to explore how we can get light industry and small manufacturing companies to relocate here. I think the quality of life is great, and we need to let people know that so that we can attract more businesses to town. I think that's being proactive.
Okay.
I feel like I just want to say ditto. I think everybody has great ideas. I think they're all similar to the ideas that I have. I think there's been a lot of speak about, you know, leadership and community involvement, and planning, as long as, you know, referencing back to the master plan. I know you were speaking to, you know, open spaces and the feel of being here and keeping that very similar. And I think that's what has drawn me back to the area and why I've lived here, and something that is very important to me as I have children and I'm raising them here and I want them to come home. So I think, you know, continuing to involve and trying to get young people my age, my demographic, to be involved as well, you know, looking for the future is something that we have to do.
The other night, during the town meeting, I cringed. We have 13 empty storefronts in downtown. And our answer was to hire a meter guy to tag cars. The businesses are suffering as it is, and our answer is, let's tag cars. And New Yorkers won't pay the tickets, it'll be the locals that get hit. And with a mentality like that, how can the town survive?
I have one thing to say about that. I was recently talking to a merchant downtown, and he said, we really need to get that parking guy back, because otherwise people park here all day. We need circulation in town to keep the cars moving so that people just don't park there all day. We need space for our customers to come in. And he thought that the parking officer was doing a great job keeping that flow going. And as far as the open stores in town, I don't think they're going to stay vacant for long.
I think Bill is right. I was talking to a commercial real estate person in town today, and there are many properties that are already under contract. There's a huge interest in both rental and purchases of buildings in Great Barrington. There are a number of things that look like they're empty, but either they're just recently empty or there's an estate involved. The owner died. I think that many people have shown incredible amount of support for and definitely, you know, many people who are involved in retail businesses and in commercial real estate have made huge investments already in this town. Top of Railroad Street, the Co-op building, Flying Church. And I think that our town is very welcoming to business. I think we just need to make sure that our rules and regulations are clarified and that they are enforced. As a former owner of a building on Railroad Street, it does make a huge difference where you are located in Great Barrington, but what I'm heartened to see is that we're expanding our commercial area. We're expanding down Bridge Street. We're expanding towards the north part of Main Street in a very suitable way so far. I don't think that, I think there's only one building I can think of that's not being rented because the rent's too high. And that is a challenge, but I think that if we, as a select board, are more encouraging towards businesses and help them to form the downtown merchant and landlord association that can do promotions and create uniform hours and do things that will draw in local people so that they have a more of a year-round economy that will be just fine.
Good.
I've spoken to a couple of realtors also, and I have to kind of disagree. I think we should get some light manufacturing, not necessarily at the storefront, but we should take the space and make it more desirable. I think that one thing Great Barrington is the lack of parking. So now we have a parking officer of some sort. I think several years ago, it's all done now, but we shot ourselves in the foot with the Main Street renovation project. That was, I can't tell you how many people I noticed that I lost my tire, I lost my rim, I can't find any place to park, and I see store owners themselves. One in particular I see every day as I go to the bank, pulls up their Mercedes, leaves it right there all day long, and it's not unusual. So I think the downtown properties have to be made more attractive, because right now they're not that attractive to clients.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think affordable housing can play a really key role in this, especially housing that's close in proximity to downtown where there's walking distance. There's a workforce issue as well as there is a shopping issue for year-round residents. And I think as much as this is an issue for town government, it's also an issue for landlords or landowners, business owners alike. And like Holly said, we need to find a way to work together. I think we all get in this very single-minded, narrow path of I need to make my own thing work. But sometimes we need to make the whole thing work. And I think that's where we are at fault right now. And I think we can do a better job at that.
Yeah, I would say as someone who has an office in Tom's Toys, the conversations that I have with the other folks who rent space in there, who are working in software development, what I hear over and over is that continuing to facilitate better high-speed and reliable internet is the key to 21st century industry.
So this question is primarily for Mr. Clark, but I'd also be interested in hearing other people's perspective on this. Mr. Clark, you mentioned that you think that Great Barrington could do without a town manager, that you could have an administrative assistant to the board. And I have either reported to boards as a CEO or served on volunteer boards for the last 30 years, and I have not yet seen a board that can by itself carry out the day-to-day tasks of even small organizations effectively, let alone an organization like the town of Great Barrington that has an $11 million budget and requires great expertise in terms of contract negotiation, balancing the needs of multiple departments, human resources issues, and so forth. In fact, one of the things that I see is that oftentimes when a nonprofit that doesn't have someone in a CEO administrative capacity has enough money, the first thing they do is hire someone because they recognize they don't have the time, the expertise, and there's also turnover, which means that oftentimes there may be a change in philosophy. So why do you think that a town as complex as this could actually work well without a town manager?
I think it's sort of an elevated administrative assistant. I think at this time, we have an ineffective town manager. That's the issue. I think there's got to be somebody more responsive, somebody more professional, and I think in my history in the corporate world, I've had administrative assistants that can easily handle the job, but they're not getting six-figure salaries and not performing.
So I'd be curious to know if the other board member, other people who are running for the board, think that this job can be done without a town manager, and also for anyone who has actually served on the board, do they have a different perspective on the performance of the town manager?
I think the town manager's done a good job. I think we have a AAA bond rating that's not easy to do, especially in the light of the transitions that have occurred in our accounting department over the last couple of years. We've had a longtime accountant retire, some temporary people, another person who left. So she's been able to manage that. I think she's made some great hires over the years. I think our new DPW guy is great, Sean Van Duzen. So she's not perfect, but I think she's done an excellent job so far. I can't see how a board could really function without someone like that in place. It's just too big a job, I think.
I think it's important not to confuse the individual with the job. I don't feel qualified to speak about Jennifer's performance. I was involved in several hirings in an advisory capacity at the library, but I don't think I know enough about her to make that decision. But I do know there are several towns in the county that have, instead of counted, I think it's called assistant town manager or something like that. It's a drop down in requirements and eligibility, and those towns are all of them have much smaller populations than we do, and consequently budgets that are a tenth the size.
Okay, anybody else?
I don't think I need to.
So I just want to say, I see a very functional town, so I think people may have a different perspective. Just one other question. When we vote for this many people, it's possible that someone could be elected with a minority vote, not a majority vote. And there's a system of ranked voting where you vote your first, second, and third choices so that everyone who gets elected is elected by a majority vote. Would you all favor a change like that so that everyone who ever gets elected to town select board would win by a majority?
Run that by me again.
Okay. Wait, 2, yes, but 5, when you have this many people who run, 6, someone could be elected with less than a majority vote. Okay, so, and there's a system that allows that to happen. So.
Cambridge does it.
Yeah, okay, so. If you're unfamiliar, I wouldn't answer.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Bill Warford. I'm 412 Monterey Road. I wish everyone tonight had identified their name and where they live in town, who's asked a question. But my question is probably directed to the parents that are running. Would you want your child to work for Amazon? given the warehouse situations we see in Pennsylvania, when we see the news about worker abuses, would you want your child to work for FedEx as a contract driver? It's one thing to talk about economic development in our area. It's a good thing to have light manufacturing. I think trade schools and things are important to our education because not every child needs to grow up to have a doctoral degree, especially not to make our quality of life better here in the Berkshires. But I think it's important that we are very wary about who we invite in to help us form our economy, because there's some plenty bad people out there who are very successful in the business world who would tear us up and spit us out and take their money and run. So when we talk about those things, I would like to be, very firmly state that while I believe in what James is saying, you have to be careful about who those businesses are. That's all. I'd like your opinion on whether you think corporations like Amazon are good for communities like ours.
I can speak to that first. I think it's a great question. We do need some industry of some sort here in the area. I think Amazon is not the right choice, or a big corporation like that. I think we definitely need to pursue some economic development, as I think it would be really fortuitous. And in that, or even before that, comes the infrastructure to support those businesses. And I think when I look to the future and my children being able to return, we need to also have the infrastructure in place for them to have the jobs that I'm hoping that they'll go to college to be qualified for. My husband's a carpenter. I run the farmer's market. I plan on attending social work school. I've been a cheesemonger before that. The things that I do, I can do living here. But some people can't. And a lot of the peers that I went to college with who left, the things that they're doing, they can't do here because there isn't high-speed internet, because there isn't businesses large enough, but not to the size of Amazon, that exist here. The commute would be too long, and the cost of living is too high.
If I just might, because you mentioned something that is also crucial to that business and economic development thing for our area. I have wonderful broadband 20 feet out from my front door. Because of the decisions of the select board, and whether it's due to cronyism or just, one hand washing the other, I can't have that broadband. So that's another thing that the select board needs to address in Barrington, and you need to open those things up so that we aren't restricted to just getting our internet from one bunch of people who don't really want to bother running those lines to our homes or giving us access.
Thank you for making me aware of that.
Yeah. To clarify a little bit, I agree we somehow should get high-speed internet. And I threw Amazon out there as an example of where they all of a sudden dropped their money out in Boston. I know from my life, there's a lot of engineering firms and manufacturing firms that are top rate, and they only employ 20, 30, 40 people. They're not huge conglomerates, and I think Great Barrington can absorb a few of those, and maintain the quality of life, give everybody a sustainable wage or better, and go from there. If I saw Amazon all of a sudden in Houstonic, where I live, say, okay, we're going to open up the mills, I would be a little nervous. So that's, I just use that as an example of what happened.
Well, I don't want to cut anybody off, but this is not a debate now, we're just trying to get information. Are other people on the board want to respond to this?
Just briefly, my answer to your question about Amazon, no. However, yes to industries like Jane Iredale, which is the ideal situation. Clean, downtown, extremely generous, and good, serious, competitive salaries.
Okay.
I don't think we have to worry about Amazon or FedEx locating here. It's just not going to happen. But I think we could certainly encourage smaller businesses, but we have to get the word out. And of course, you know, high-speed internet we need. Although I started a business in 1990 that dealt with companies all over the country, almost all over the world. And that was before the internet. So it can be done there too. But I encourage us to get the internet going, the high speed.
Chris?
Yeah, I just think it's important to echo what Ms. Burke said, is that there are a number of industries and companies in town and in our surrounding regions that struggle to fill open positions now. And it's because those who are coming into beginning positions, entry-level positions, are not able to afford housing in our community. So the work that Mr. Cook is doing and what Ms. Burke mentioned is vital if we want to attract more people into our town.
Further questions, please come up to the microphone. Next.
Yeah, so this year was W.E.B. Du Bois's 150th birthday anniversary. And this January, February, there were some great events that went on celebrating the legacy of Du Bois. In a recent select board meeting, there was a little bit of a conversation about Du Bois's legacy and what to do with that. So I'm opening it to you guys. What do you think the select board should do? What citizen initiatives should the select board encourage and support to continue on celebrating that legacy?
Thanks for bringing that up. I believe that Sean Stanton was talking about renaming Bridge Street. After talking to Tim Geller, who's chair of the CDC and the 100 Bridge Street, the brownfields, he suggested that the park that's slated to be run right along the Housatonic River, and the extension of the Riverwalk, that would be a really wonderful place to use W.B. Du Bois' name, and I agree with him. On the library, as a friend of the library, we've been talking with several people about using the library front lawn as a place for a statue of Du Bois. And actually, I think it was Ed Abrams' idea, a seated statue on a bench in front of the library with him reading a book, I think would be a great tie-in. I think there have been incredible celebrations all over the world of his birthday, and many people have begun to see him as first and foremost a writer. So I like to tie in with the library, and I think we should do as much as people are willing to do.
I think the issue with Mr. Du Bois is revisionist history. I don't think he's earned a place for a statue or his streets being renamed. I mean, he is historically, if you read your history, had an affiliation with Adolf Hitler, the communists, and the Soviet Union. I mean, he may have been an interesting intellectual guy, but I think it's mostly a tourism prop. I don't see us, I don't denigrate him, but I don't see us adopting him as a native son.
Anyone else?
So at Railroad Street Youth Project, we worked with the Du Bois 150th celebration to commemorate Du Bois with murals that are now hanging in downtown Great Barrington where you can see that. And the important thing about that is that young people were part of the initiative that educated each other about Du Bois and his legacy and his commitment to education and the advancement of Black Americans. And that is a legacy that should be celebrated and we should embrace in Great Barrington.
Anybody else?
Carol Deal, Housatonic. I have sat in select board meetings and spoken several times about economic development. I suggested once that we have an economic development officer, and the select board said we have a planner, we don't need that. So And the Finance Committee also has recommended an economic development officer. How would you approach attracting other businesses here? We all know we need it, but how would you do it?
There's a number of trade groups, craft guilds, things like that, who we could advertise in. If we put a little money aside, we could attract some people, I think, that way. I think we also need a trade school here in town. I think Southern Berkshire desperately needs to expand its trade school opportunities. I think that alone would help fill some of the existing jobs and create some new jobs, possibly. If people knew there were people here who could work for their company, making high-end furniture or anything like that, any sort of small manufacturing company, I think that's what I would do. And I think the Economic Development Committee is sort of my next project.
Anyone else?
I think maybe to get the biggest bang for the buck here, we should get somebody for economic development and roll that into the position of town planner, so that some of these projects that are coming up are gauged to, attract in town. I mean, I agree with Ursula. We, as basically a dumb carpenter, I mean, we're not spending enough time with the trades, not at all. And we have the places to, people can make a really substantial living and have a good lifestyle with their carpenters, plumbers, electricians, all that sort of stuff, which I know sometimes these days, if you need some work done, see who calls you back. I mean, it's difficult. So, I think embracing those trades is really important.
Anyone else? Wait, excuse me, Carolyn, is that something?
Okay, I'm asking this question for my husband, Paul Ivory, who was not able to make the meeting tonight. He's the chairman of the Historical Commission here in town. And his question is, what role do you envision for historic preservation in the development of Great Barrington?
I think that plays a really important role, as so much of what is special about Great Barrington is its history between W.D. Du Bois and many other elements that my brain is just not thinking about right now. But I think that is really important to the fabric of our community, its people and its natural spaces as well as its created spaces. That it's essential.
I think I spend a lot of time wandering around in the woods, believe it or not. And it's great to see what the landscape used to be. Historical preservation is a wonderful thing. I mean, people go through the woods and they see an old stone wall, but that used to be somebody's farm. And every once in a while you end up stumbling over a graveyard somewhere. And I saw a great picture once up Long Pond Road, which is where I had a place. And it was all completely clear cut. That was the farming in 1900, and now it's come back. The forests are back, the deer are back, all that stuff, and the buildings in town. My passion when I started in construction was restoring them. I used to do timber framing for years and years and years. We did all oak frame buildings throughout the county. I mean, I'll send you pictures of a dozen of them, from Monterey all the way over to Steventown. Historical preservation is extremely important, and the detail to doing that is we got to save that life.
I think the Community Preservation Act fund that's administered in this town has been a wonderful way to call attention to many of our historic buildings, public and private, and whose facade, if not their purpose anymore, really enhances the look of Great Barrington, the feeling of Great Barrington, and is what makes it very special. I would love to see the Community Preservation Group allocate even more funds towards town because I think there was a period, maybe 10 years ago or so, where there was a lot of deferred maintenance. And I think that using that money and parlaying it with other forms of contributions and donations has helped us, especially within the Haley restoration. It really helped us to put a highlight on all of those special things. I think the town of Great Barrington is really quite unusual in that, I think it was 1902, there was a massive fire on Railroad Street, and consequently all of the buildings were rebuilt at the same time, and that's why we have those wonderful brick buildings without a gap all the way up the street. So I think that historic preservation should definitely be on the select board's radar, and it could be helped and it could be supported even more strongly than it has been.
Bill?
I learned 2 hard lessons in 2 communities that I lived in where community preservation wasn't a priority. One is I grew up where Rutherford B. Hayes, former president of the United States, was born and raised, and his boyhood home is now replaced with a BP station and a small plaque, which is something that can't be undone. And another community I lived in, a historic courthouse with beautiful interiors, was razed, and now a prefab courthouse stands in its place. And it's something that can't be undone. So oftentimes we see the new, the exciting, and we forget what came before and why we have what we have. And I think it's important for us, before we make any decisions about raising buildings or refabbing buildings, that we understand why that building was there and what it means to the town.
So I think our downtown is one of our greatest assets. I mean, the buildings there have been there forever. Well, not forever, but for a long time. And the Historic Commission has kept them that way. I mean, you can't do anything in the historic district without consulting with them, and I think that's a great thing. It's a real asset to have these buildings in town. In fact, during the Main Street reconstruction, when the trees were taken down, I think I actually saw some of those buildings for the first time, really, as they stood out. And it's a beautiful downtown. I hope we keep it that way.
Someone else?
Yeah, this is for Mr. Clark. Now, Mr. Clark, did I hear right that you said that Adolf Hitler, or that W. Du Bois was associated with Adolf Hitler, or somehow recognizes? Now, we all know that Du Bois was a card-carrying communist in his last years, but with Adolf Hitler? I'd like to know your source on that.
Well,
and remember, he rejected Jesse Owens in the '36 Berlin Olympics.
he at one time supported Hitler in 1936.
I never heard. What's your source on that? That has to be.
I got that out of the history book.
I never heard of that. I'm a student of this area here. Absolutely never heard of that before. Well, and any other biographies of W. Du Bois and so on and so forth? And I think that's a very inappropriate statement. Knowing Du Bois and knowing Adolf Hitler, I just don't.
He apparently.
You say apparently.
If it's sure. I don't want to let this become a debate. If you have something, you certainly can bring it up afterwards. Are there other questions? Yes.
Hi, Tom Blauvelt, 19 Lake Avenue, Great Barrington. I also have the honor to serve as chair of the Finance Committee and the CPA Committee. And we talked a little bit earlier about encouraging businesses to relocate to Great Barrington. But what are we doing to actively support the existing businesses here? This is sort of a pet peeve of mine, that the town manager has the authority to spend quite a bit of money. We buy $21,000 a year of auto parts from a store in Canaan, Connecticut. We spend upwards of $100,000 for an excavating company, not in Great Barrington. And the one that really gets me, because I work for an insurance agency, we spend $1 million in insurance premiums to a company in Woburn, Mass. Now, none of these organizations support the Scout Troops, the Little League, the fundraisers for the Holiday Stroll or the Summerfest. So I'd like to know what, if whoever, we're going to have at least one new member on the board, what can we do to reinvest that town money back into town businesses?
I think it's,
Anyone?
it takes some research, it takes some work. I suspect that unfortunately I spend the same kind of money, sort of, to the insurance company in Woburn. If I go to Wheeler and Taylor and want to insure something, all of a sudden I get there's my bill, and it goes to Woburn, Massachusetts. I mean, I don't seem to have a lot to say about it. So there's got to be some sort of, what you want to call it, a green initiative. I mean, auto parts, obviously, you can get those at Great Barrington.
We have 2 stores.
Yeah, all that sort of stuff. But when we start outsourcing to bigger entities, you land where you land. And you really don't have a whole lot to say about it. I mean, my house insurance went to Champaign, Illinois. God knows why. But that's the bill I get. So, I mean, those things you have to, because Wheeler and Taylor or any of the companies around, they outsource it all. I mean, they're the storefront and the broker, and away it goes. I mean, you can go on the one with the little lizard, Geico or something, and you end up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida all of a sudden. And those kind of things are